So wonderful to see you all here. Thank you for being here. Thank you for coming and learning. And I wanted to introduce Jenni to you. This is Jenni McDonnell. She is a student of mine at Cal Poly, and she's just finishing up her master's in nutrition, and it's actually a combined program with a dietetic internship. So interns are required to complete their master's of nutrition before starting our internship, which is a year long. And the students rotate through the community through all kinds of different settings, including our farm. But they do lots of clinical work, lots of community work, and it's a really great opportunity for them to get work experience and learning experience in our community. So Jenni was excited to be at the farm, and as part of that, she helps us identify areas that we can continue to develop, and we're always really excited to offer community nutrition education as well. So as a long-term plant-based eater, lifelong plant-based eater,
roughly.
She put together a topic that she's actually really developed in her master's work, and it's really about optimizing plant-based nutrition and figuring out how to get the most out of our plants. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the table over to her, but thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And,
Thanks, Marissa. So I'm Jenni, and I'm going to talk to you about getting the most nutrition out of plants. A little bit about the backstory of why I decided to do this topic and why it's the center of like my master's work is because I was taking a class last year, and I was doing, we were learning about minerals, so like iron, zinc, iodine, all the different minerals. And I've been plant-based for almost 9 years, and I have my undergrad degree in nutrition and have done my own research, and I felt really confident. And I was in this class, I'm like, my mind is blown. Calcium and iron compete with each other. Like, how am I getting it? Like, how am I getting the nutrients I thought I was getting? And I started to spiral a little bit. And with that, I started to develop this need to figure out how can I maximize my nutrient absorption from plants, and how can I get the very most, because there are certain things that limit it, which I'll get into, but that's kind of a little bit of the background. So we're gonna start a little bit with foundations of nutrition, a lot of definitions. It's gonna be a little bit science heavy, so bear with me. And then we're going to go into the different nutrients to consider on a plant-based diet. So ones you've probably heard of, like iron and calcium, vitamin D, vitamin B12. And then at the end, we're just going to apply it all into hopefully something that isn't stressful. And I hope I don't leave you spiraling, and I actually can help you feel more confident in having a plant-based diet. So, oh, that's weird. I have a funny image. If anyone is a Parks and Rec fan, this is just a funny image about him learning that the food we eat becomes the energy we use. But I have a question for you. Does eating food automatically mean that our body is able to get and use all of the nutrients in that food? Yeah, you guys are a smart bunch. So kind of the first idea I want to get you to understand is that food is not just the sum of its nutrients. Nutrients are the individual components within food that our body uses to support life, growth, energy, and overall health. And there are 6 essential nutrients that we need as humans. These are carbohydrates, protein, fats, vitamins, minerals, and water. So when we talk about nutrients, we're actually talking about the individual components. So maybe vitamin C, maybe vitamin A, or iron, or calcium. And then on the other hand, food is the whole complex structure. So it's a matrix made up of those nutrients I just discussed. And then also, if it's a plant, it's coming with other things like fiber or phytochemicals or food additives. This. Oh, I thought that was this playing it. No, it's all good. I thought I was doing something. So it's the way that food is organized within this physical and chemical structure that inevitably affects how we are able to absorb those nutrients and use it for the various physiological functions in our body. So you can probably guess where this is going, but my point is that eating food doesn't automatically mean or guarantee that we are digesting, absorbing, and utilizing the nutrients in that food. So my first term is bioavailability, and this term refers to how much of a nutrient our body is actually able to absorb and use. So digestion begins in your mouth. Some mechanical breakdown of those foods starts turning it into smaller pieces, and then go down to the stomach. Got some acids and digestive enzymes that break it down further. Then we get to our small intestine, and this is where the majority of nutrient absorption occurs. So once food is broken down into its smallest particles, so if we're talking about carbs, talking about glucose, we're talking about protein, we're talking about amino acids, and vitamins and minerals are already in their smallest forms. So those will cross out of the GI tract through the endothelial lining of our gut and into our circulation, so bloodstream or lymphatic system if it's fat. But this basically, just tying it back to bioavailability, it doesn't equate to the amount of nutrient in a food necessarily. So if a label says 5 milligrams of iron, it's not guaranteed that we're going to get those 5 milligrams of iron into our bloodstream. It depends on the food matrix or these other factors. So like nutrient dose, so how much? Is it 5 milligrams or is it 10 milligrams? And then there's various forms of each nutrient, like iron. There's 2 forms of iron, 2 forms of vitamin A, vitamin D, a lot of different forms of the vitamin depending on the source of the food. So if it's an animal product or a plant-based product. And then nutrient interactions. I'm going to talk a little bit about this later, but essentially what else you eat with that food will impact how bioavailable the nutrient can be. And then host-related factors, I think this is one of the most underrated things because there's so many things that can affect how like bioavailability differs between people. So you could have a healthy microbiome. That's going to help you absorb more nutrients. Unfortunately, as we get older, our ability to absorb nutrients some nutrients does decrease. So age, health status, or a condition. So if you have excessive alcohol use, that can impact your ability to absorb nutrients. Or if you're pregnant, the opposite, you have increased needs and then your body compensates and it actually takes in more nutrients, which is pretty cool. And then how food is prepared. So various cooking techniques can alter the structure, specifically of plant foods, and change how well those nutrients are available and how well we can absorb them. And that's the part I'm kind of going to focus a little bit today because that's the part we can change and we have a lot of power over that and a lot of simple strategies. The next term is nutrient interactions. This one's pretty simple. It's basically a nutrient interaction is when one nutrient is affected by another. So if you're having a complex meal, which most of us eat mixed meals, having one nutrient may either increase absorption of the other or it might decrease absorption. So it's just helpful to have those in mind, especially with plant-based eating, because a little helpful interactions can go a long way. And then my next term is anti-nutrients, and I have a hard time with this naming of this compound. I just strongly disagree with whoever decided to name it because it just causes some unnecessary fear and concern. Like looking at that, you're like, how can that be good? But anti-nutrients are naturally occurring compounds in all plants, and they actually exist to protect the plants. So they're a result of a natural defense mechanism, whether they're like plants they can't act like animals, they can't get up and run away. So they have to create these compounds to keep away like insects or microbes or just protect themselves from the surrounding environment. The reason they get termed anti-nutrients is because in our body, it can affect how well we are able to absorb minerals and other vitamins from the plant food. So they affect this by different anti-nutrients will bind to minerals in our GI tract and then we're not able to absorb them and get them into our circulation. They just get binded and then excreted. or they might inhibit digestive enzymes. So enzymes needed to break down carbs and protein might be inhibited because of these anti-nutrients. So that's why they're important, and that's why I wanted to bring it up. But they are like a natural thing, and they're not as bad as the term leads them to be, and I'll get to that later. But first, the not so exciting part. So these are some common ones. I'm going to start with phytates first. These are found in beans, lentils, whole grains, seeds, and nuts. Phytic acid can bind to minerals like iron, zinc, or calcium in the gut, and like I said, make them like form a complex that we can't absorb, so then it just gets excreted. And then oxalates, these specifically bind to calcium. I think one of the most famous ones is spinach. It has a lot of calcium in it, but it also has a lot of oxalic acid, so it makes the calcium not very bioavailable, which is heartbreaking. So you only end up getting about 5% of the calcium from spinach. And then lectins, these are found in legumes and nuts, grains, some vegetables. They get a pretty bad rap because they bind carbohydrates and they impair digestion. So like I mentioned before, if they inhibit the enzymes needed for breaking down carbs, that's kind of where what lectin does. However,
sorry, can I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
I'm always curious because there's been a lot of bad press on beans because of the lectin.
Right.
Aren't they kind of inactivated by cooking?
Yeah, I was just about to get there. No, you're all good. Most lectins can be managed through traditional cooking techniques, and I'm gonna get into a lot of like how to manage all of this next, so don't get too doom and gloom about them. I know this is like not the most exciting slide. And then tannins, these are found in tea, coffee, grapes, some legumes. These specifically reduce iron absorption when consumed with a meal, and tannins are what give things an astringent taste, or like that bitter taste. And my favorite example is like if you ever take a bite of an unripe banana and it kind of leaves that like dry feeling in your mouth, that's a tannin. It's like actually interacting with the enzymes in your saliva, and it ends up drying out your mouth, which is kind of interesting. Also with wine or dark chocolate, like some bitter things. And then goitrins are found in cruciferous vegetables, so broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, kale. These compounds can slightly reduce iodine uptake, but only when iodine is already low. And in people who get enough iodine, this typically isn't a problem. But the reason I bring it up is because plant-based eaters can maybe not always get enough iodine, so it's important to mention. And then enzyme inhibitors, these are found in legumes, grains, and seeds. These slightly reduce the digestion of protein and carbs, like I mentioned. But guys, there is hope. So you're probably reading this and thinking, how can something termed anti-nutrients be positive in any way? It sounds negative. It sounds like something we should be avoiding altogether, especially after I just told you how they can reduce absorption of critical micronutrients. But I get to be the bearer of good news, and if there's one thing I hope you take away from this class, it's that anti-nutrients are not a reason to avoid plant foods. I think that they get a lot of bad rep in social media and mainstream media these days, but they're not toxic, they're not harmful, and in the context of a balanced diet, they don't cancel out the nutrients that we get from plants. And many of these same compounds that are labeled anti-nutrients are actually part of the reason why plant-based diets have such profound health benefits. Some of these anti-nutrients can be associated with like antioxidant activity, reduced inflammation, improved gut health, and even protection against chronic disease. So plant foods are not the problem. I think the effects of anti-nutrients are only to be concerned when there's like improper cooking techniques, or the diet is extremely limited, or you're not getting enough of the nutrient, like the micronutrients overall. So how do we work with them? Let's start with phytates. These are, like I said, they're found in legumes, whole grains, nuts, and seeds. And what's important is that phytate content and its effects vary widely depending on food type, processing, and overall diet quality. Research shows that cooking, soaking, fermenting, and germination reduce phytate levels and improve mineral bioaccessibility. High phytate foods are also rich in fiber and fermentable carbohydrates, which can help your gut adapt over time to phytates and actually like improve mineral absorption. So something you can do at home to reduce phytates might be, if you're cooking like lentils from scratch, is just like soaking them for the night before in water, or also cooking them eliminates a lot of the phytates as well. So even if you don't get to soaking them and can't think that far ahead, cooking them reduces a lot of them. Or if you're having like chia seeds, instead of throwing them in your smoothie, maybe you pour them with a glass of like plant-based milk and you make chia seed pudding, because then they can expand and you actually end up with a little bit more of the nutrients from that. And then lectins, these are the ones found mainly in legumes. The concern around lectins comes from studies done on raw or unprocessed foods where lectins can interfere with digestion, but we're not really consuming raw legumes, raw beans. I hope none of us are. So lectins are heat sensitive, so boiling legumes dramatically reduces lectin activity, in some cases over 90%. And then pressure cooking and other high heat methods are also effective. And human studies looking at properly cooked legumes don't show any negative effects on gut health or nutrient absorption. So essentially, as long as your beans are cooked, lectins are not something you need to worry about. And then oxalates, these are the ones that bind calcium. And the concern comes from, again, measurements taken in raw food. A lot of high oxalate foods we are consuming cooked, so like tofu or potatoes, those are often eaten cooked. And then wet cooking methods like boiling or steaming significantly reduce oxalates. So if you steam your spinach or boil it, anywhere from 30 to 90%, especially in leafy greens. And then goitrins, those are the compounds found mainly in the cruciferous vegetables. And in theory, the studies have shown, or they've been studied because they can interfere with your body's thyroid, your body's ability to use iodine, like in your thyroid. But most of the research about goitrins causing harm comes from animal studies using extremely high intakes, or from populations that are already known to be iodine deficient. But in human studies, most research shows very neutral effects on thyroid health in healthy individuals. And then also cooking greatly reduces goitrin content. And I would say cruciferous vegetables are far more beneficial than they are harmful. And in terms of goitrins, I would say iodine status matters more, but we're going to talk about iodine a little bit later. And then enzyme inhibitors, those are most relevant in legumes. And the good news is thermal processing, like cooking, boiling, or pressure cooking, significantly reduces enzyme inhibitors. So again, another example that sounds scary on paper, but in real life, it's handled by traditional cooking methods. So as long as you're cooking your lentils and your beans and not eating them raw, enzyme inhibitors are nothing you need to worry about. And then tannins, those are the ones that leave that astringent taste in your mouth. They have the ability to reduce iron absorption by binding to it in the gut, and then it makes it unavailable for our body to absorb. Boiling is a highly effective way to reduce tannin in vegetables specifically, and then soaking legumes or grains in water for several hours before cooking, or like overnight, can also help reduce the tannin content. And then fermentation can break down tannins. So maybe that means opting for tempeh instead of tofu, or sourdough bread. And also letting fruits fully ripen, which I don't really like unripe fruit. I don't know about you guys, but. And then as far as coffee and tea go, you could either space them out with your meals, like have them like an hour before, hour after your meals to help them not interact so much with the iron absorption. Or you can add milk to your coffee or tea, or lemon, because that will help neutralize some of the tannins. So yeah, that's that's how to work with them. So the main takeaways is use a bunch of those various cooking techniques. Soak your grains, nuts, seeds, legumes, or make or buy fermented foods. High heat and water is able to degrade some of those anti-nutrients, so boiling and steaming. I will say that steaming helps preserve some of the vitamins versus boiling, because you might lose some into the water. And then balance is key. So having a variety of different plant-based foods is going to give you a different amount in each food. So that's kind of the biggest thing is don't have a monotonous diet of just the same thing every day. Try to eat a variety, and then incorporate cooked and raw vegetables. Raw isn't always better. And don't stress over these, even though it sounds scary and daunting. You're probably doing a lot more right than you think. And then,
yeah, just for confirming in my own thought. So it's not that they pull the nutrients out of your body, it's just that you're not able to absorb the ones from the food. I had a misunderstanding.
Yes. Yeah. So they'll bind in your gut before they're able to be absorbed. So if they bind and form a complex, that complex then can't be absorbed, so it just gets excreted. So on a more positive note, I think we're going to have some salad be passed out soon. But yeah, and then the salad is, it's kind of like a harvest salad. I was torn between making something hot and cold, so I kind of combined the two. So it's got arugula and kale from the farm, and then sweet potatoes, chickpeas, what else? Quinoa, apples, walnuts, and then like a lemon tahini dressing. I hope you guys like it. I've like made a version of it before, but hopefully it's good. I tried to like pack in as many nutrients as I could, and you know, I made my quinoa, I soaked it, what did I do? Massaged my kale, you know, all the things I could think of. So kind of jumping into the second part of today is going over the nutrients of concern on a plant-based diet. I'm sure a lot of you have heard these before. Maybe you've been asked them by family members or friends. How are you getting enough protein? How are you getting your B12, etc.? I just want to say that this does not mean, just because these are nutrients of focus or concern, does not mean that plant-based diets are inadequate. I think all diets require careful planning, and I think that plant-based diets get a bad rap because you're technically like reducing or eliminating something from your diet. So it's like, oh, something's missing, then your nutrients are less than. But I think your nutrients just shift, and I think you could be fully omnivorous, and maybe your focus is, are you getting enough fiber? How is your saturated fat? So I definitely think all diets require careful planning. So I'm going to jump into iron first. This one's important. It's one of the big ones I think people worry about. It's essential for oxygen transport, energy production, immune health, and brain function. It comes in two forms. So there's heme iron, which is found in animal foods, and then there's non-heme iron in plants. The concern isn't really how much vegan or vegetarian or plant-based eaters are getting. Research shows vegans and vegetarians often eat the same amount or more iron than omnivores. It's really the absorption. So heme iron from animals is absorbed more efficiently. I believe like 30 to 40% of it gets absorbed, whereas non-heme iron is absorbed at much lower rates, but it is variable based off of things that you pair it with. So going back to the idea of nutrient interactions, so iron specifically from plants is strongly affected by other components in the meal. So like I said before, there's things like anti-nutrients that can inhibit it, but there's also vitamin C that can like significantly increase your body's ability to absorb iron. And also I found, this is new to me, but I found one study that found adding garlic and onion increases bioaccessibility by 66% in grains and 73% in legumes. And that was both in raw and cooked forms, which I thought was really interesting. And I don't know about you, but I add garlic to everything because it just makes everything taste better. And then another thing that's pretty cool about iron, or more cool about our bodies is that when our iron stores are low, our bodies will compensate and absorb more, and then vice versa. When our stores are higher, it will not absorb as much, but that's specific to non-heme iron, which is in plants. So even though vegetarians and plant-based eaters consume similar amounts of iron, we might not be absorbing as much, and therefore we may have lower stores of iron. So the health implications are a bit nuanced, but very low stores can increase risk for fatigue, impaired cognition, and reduced immune function. On the flip side, lower iron stores may also be metabolically protective, since excess iron, specifically heme iron, so the one in animals, has been linked to insulin resistance and chronic disease risk. The good news is that large population studies show that vegans and vegetarians don't consistently have higher rates of iron deficiency anemia, which you would think they would, but a lot of the theories behind that is because plant-based eaters have a lot of vitamin C in their diet, so that helps compensate. And then the other thing I just want to note is the iron needs for men and women are different. Specifically for reproductive age women, our iron needs are, I think, about 10 milligrams or micrograms more, or milligrams, sorry. That's because we're losing blood every month. So that's just something to be aware of. And maybe if you're a woman, you need to be a little bit more conscious about it, or get your lab check and just make sure you're not having any subclinical deficiency. And then also the daily recommended intake is higher for vegan and vegetarians for iron because it's not absorbed as well. It's 1.8 times higher than it is for omnivores. So that's also just something to keep in mind, and just emphasize the importance of planning and making sure to do those things that we can. So like pairing them with vitamin C rich foods. I think like if we have an iron rich food like legumes, whole grains, nuts, seeds, and then pairing them with vitamin C rich foods. So that means citrus fruits, strawberries, kiwi, tomatoes, even broccoli. So yeah, my personal favorite combo for iron rich foods, or what makes me feel like I'm getting my iron, is like having dark chocolate, which has a lot of iron, and pairing it with a strawberry, or having like a chocolate covered strawberry. But if I'm too lazy, I'll just have both. And then, like I said, the anti-nutrients like phytates, even a little bit of the oxalates will do the opposite and decrease absorption. So just making sure to soak or sprout or ferment or cook your grains, or all of the above, and legumes. And then the other thing you could do if you're interested is cooking with a cast iron pot or pan. That can also leach some iron into your food, as long as you're using an organic acid, so something that will help, like the vitamin C, so the citrus will help. I don't personally own a cast iron, but I invested in a little thing called an iron fish, and it's like a little piece of iron like this big in the shape of a fish, and you just like drop it in your pot while you're boiling water and with some lemon or something, and it will help increase the iron, and like if you're making pasta or rice or something. I definitely don't recommend any supplements unless your doctor has like diagnosed you with iron deficiency anemia. So iron supplements are not recommended, but again, like get your labs tested, talk to your doctor if that's something you're concerned about. Next one is zinc. This is a small mineral, but it plays a big role. It helps our immune system, supports metabolism, keeps our gut healthy, helps with healing and repair. When zinc is low, you might start to notice like slower wound healing, more colds, or even like a reduced sense of taste or smell. Plant foods do contain zinc, especially whole grains, beans, nuts, seeds, and tofu. The challenge, again, is that zinc from plants is not as bioavailable or absorbed as easily because of the phytates, those anti-nutrients. The good news is the body can adapt and absorb zinc more efficiently over time. So plant-based eaters seem to do okay. And again, the strategy is to regularly include zinc-rich foods. So beans, lentils, whole grains, and then even tempeh, and then simple food prep. So the soaking, so letting beans, lentils or grains sit in water for a few hours or overnight, and then sprouting, soaking beans or grains long enough to where they start to sprout, fermenting. So that kind of scares me a little bit, like doing that myself, but buying sourdough or tempeh, those are good options, and those can help, fermentation can help like break down the phytates and increase mineral absorption. And similar to iron, the same study that I mentioned earlier found that adding garlic and onion to meals also increased zinc absorption. So not only are you getting more iron, but you're getting more zinc. Because a lot of these foods, there's a lot of overlap if you haven't noticed. Calcium. This is a big one to pay attention to on plant-based diets. We usually think of it for bone health, but it's essential for a lot of other things like muscle contraction, nerve signaling, blood clotting, hormone release, and enzyme regulation. Across studies, vegans consistently consume less calcium than vegetarians or omnivores. In several European cohorts, average intakes were well below recommendations, and a large percentage of vegans didn't meet the needs. Similar to iron, calcium our body can adapt to calcium intake by absorbing more and then excreting less. So there is some compensatory mechanisms, but it only does so much and for so long. And then some studies, low intake of calcium was associated with elevated parathyroid hormone. This PTH, parathyroid hormone, it's a signal that the body is pulling calcium from your bones. And clinically, this matters because of the potential for higher risk of fracture. And then one important thing to know about calcium.
Sorry, I just wanted to say a personal thing about that. My parathyroid was elevated for over a decade, and no doctor ever said anything about it, but I was low, and I was not getting enough calcium.
Yeah.
And now I have osteoporosis, and I had a lot of problems related to that. So
yeah,
the primary doctors don't really understand hypoparathyroidism the way they should, which is all I needed was a little extra calcium.
Yeah.
And I probably could have saved myself a lot of problems.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for sharing. An important thing about calcium bioavailability is that it varies a lot by food. So dairy is absorbed at about 30%, and calcium from calcium-set tofu or fortified soy milks or fortified plant milks are absorbed just as well, so around that 30%. And some plant foods are actually excellent sources. So the low oxalate vegetables, so kale, bok choy, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, these have absorption rates higher than dairy, around 50 to 60%. On the other hand, the high oxalate vegetables, so like the spinach, Swiss chard, those, even though they contain a lot of calcium, it's not absorbed very much.
What about almond milk? Is that a high calcium?
It all depends on if it's fortified.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I believe, if I'm right, almonds themselves are pretty high oxalate, but if they're being fortified with calcium, you'll be totally fine. Yeah. When you make almond milk, there's really 3 almonds in it. It's not very much. It's a lot of water. So I don't think that there'd be any inhibitory things. I think it's just a matter of fortification. And then, so the takeaway here is that not that plant-based diets can't provide enough calcium, they absolutely can, but that it requires intention. So prioritizing low oxalate plant-based foods, and then when you do have the high oxalate foods, making sure to do steaming or boiling to help reduce those oxalates, and then regularly using calcium fortified foods, plant milks, plant yogurts, etc. And then as far as supplementation goes, calcium is not generally recommended to supplement, but again, that is a conversation between you and your doctor, and definitely depends on your own individual labs. And vitamin D, this one goes right along with calcium. Most of you know it probably has something to do with your bone health, and that's because vitamin D helps regulate calcium in the body. So it does this by increasing calcium absorption in the gut, and then also reducing calcium loss in the urine. And it works very close with parathyroid hormone to keep our blood calcium levels stable. So when vitamin D is low, the body absorbs less calcium, and then PTH increases, and then calcium gets pulled from our bones. This can weaken our bones and increase our risk of fracture. So it's not just important to make sure you have the calcium, but also the vitamin D to go with it. And then vitamin D does more than just bone health. It helps with immune function and cell regulation. And even though we make vitamin D from sun exposure, there's a lot of different factors that affect how much we're able to do that. So how much are we really going outside? If we're going outside, are we covered head to toe? Are we wearing sunscreen? Skin pigmentation affects calcium or vitamin D absorption, age, seasons, and even though we live in sunny California right now, we're not getting very much UV exposure. So definitely something to think about. And vitamin D is found in foods like fatty fish, egg yolks, fortified dairy, but in plant-based diets, its sources are much more limited. So vegans mainly rely on fortified plant milks, yogurts, fortified cereals or juices, and then UV-exposed mushrooms. Research consistently shows that vegans have lower vitamin D intakes and lower blood levels when fortified foods or supplements are not being used. And then when supplement is used or is common, vegan vitamin D status is similar to meat eaters, showing it's not so much a planning issue, or it's very much a planning issue and not a limitation of the diet itself. And then, so the reason vitamin D is so important, I kind of mentioned this before, but low vitamin D can compound with low calcium, and that can, again, increase the risk for poor bone health. Mm-hmm.
UV mushrooms grown outdoors?
They can be grown indoors, UV light. Mm-hmm. It usually says on the package. It'll say it like pretty in bold. Yeah, you can probably find it. Or there's like a sun or something that says UV exposed mushrooms. Yeah.
Would that be a health food store?
No, it's everywhere. Yeah, you probably the mushrooms you're already buying probably have them, but you can just look out for it next time you buy them. So like I said, even in California, the fall and winter sun is not very strong here to reliably support vitamin D status alone. So, and because plant-based sources are limited, I would recommend a vitamin D supplement, but definitely get your labs tested first to see if you need it, because vitamin D is not water soluble. So there is risk for toxicity if you overconsume a supplement. But yeah, there's a vitamin D3 supplement from algae that is like easily absorbed. Vitamin D3 is more easily absorbed than D2 sources. So it's plant-based, effective, one of the simplest ways to protect your bone health, especially during the winter months. But like I said, definitely get your labs tested, talk to your doctor before doing anything. Next is iodine. So this is a small but very important mineral needed for,
I have a question on the D3.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard lately the need to mix it with K2. Is that a thing or not?
Yeah, I have also heard that recently. I'd have to do more research on that. I don't know. That one's a hard one because K2 is also something that's like not abundant in plant-based diet, but we do make it in our gut, so we don't necessarily need to supplement it. And I don't really recommend supplementing something you don't need to do, but I would have to do more research on that one. Maybe, yeah.
I think the research is still really developing in that area. That's kind of a novel concept.
Yeah.
But as of now, we know that K2 facilitates calcium metabolism. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of synergistic with vitamin D. It doesn't facilitate absorption of D, but it can help calcium be utilized in the right way in our body, which is really to promote calcification in our bones and not our soft tissue. I think the jury is just out about who really needs that, and then how much is really necessary in order for it to be a benefit, because as Jenni said, we don't want to necessarily supplement with things that we don't need.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. So iodine's important because it's used to make thyroid hormone, which helps regulate our metabolism, our energy levels, our body temperature. It's also really important during pregnancy and breastfeeding since it can play a role in brain development and nervous system development. For people who regularly eat fish, dairy, or eggs, iodine is usually less of a concern, but as people move towards like plant-based diets or fully plant-based, iodine is one of the nutrients that can easily get overlooked. Most plant foods are naturally low in iodine, so intake can drop off if those animal sources are removed. Research consistently shows that people following vegan diets are at high risk for low iodine intake unless they're intentionally including it. The good news is that iodine adequacy is usually easy to maintain with some simple habits. So instead of using sea salt or like the fun salts that taste better, replacing that with iodized salt can go a long way. It's a very effective, safe, and inexpensive method to reaching your iodine needs. And something that was new to me when I was researching this is that iodine losses occur during cooking, so especially boiling. So if you want to season your food with salt, do it at the very end. Interesting. I didn't know that either. And then for people who don't use iodized salt or salt in general, a low dose iodine supplement may be needed, but again, talk to your doctor and get those labs tested before doing anything. And then a lot of people think that there's iodine in seaweed, which there is. It's just a very inconsistent amount, so it varies widely on like the different sources of seaweed. I believe nori seaweed is like one of the most safe ones that you can like have every now and then. But kelp and kelp supplements, those can actually push your iodine levels into excess, which can hurt your thyroid as well. So just something to be cautious of. And then, yeah, that takeaway from this one is mainly like if you are fully plant-based and you don't consume fish, dairy, or eggs, iodine is something to think about and to just do those simple swaps of regular salt to iodized salt. But yeah, that can make a huge difference. And then selenium, another one that supports thyroid health, immune function, and antioxidant protection. The good news for us is that selenium is readily found in our soils in North America, so it's not really something to be too concerned about here versus like other regions in the world, like Asia and Europe, I believe, have lower amounts of selenium in their soil, so they have higher risks of deficiency there if they're relying solely on plants. But yeah, we're likely getting enough in California, but it is still smart to consider implementing or including some selenium-rich foods. And the most famous is probably the Brazil nut. You really don't need a lot, like one nut a day, if that, is plenty. So, because there's a very high amount of selenium in Brazil nuts. So even if you just have like 1 to 2 a couple times a week, that should cover your bases. And then whole grains, seeds, and legumes also have selenium. But this one is kind of not something to be too concerned about. As long as you're having a diverse plant-based diet, you should be okay. B12, everyone's favorite to talk about. This one, there's really no gray area here on a plant-based diet. B12 is essential for making red blood cells, supporting brain and nerve health, and helping keep our energy levels up. The key thing to know about B12 is that it doesn't naturally occur in plant foods in meaningful amounts. So if you eat completely vegan or plant-based, you have to get it from fortified foods or supplements. The tricky thing about B12 is that a deficiency can develop very slowly and quietly for years. Some people may feel effects like tired, foggy, or like notice some tingling in their feet or hands, but others feel completely fine for years and don't notice that their levels are dropping. And then it can lead to like irreversible nerve damage if it's not managed and fixed. So when researchers look at plant-based eaters, they consistently find vegans who don't supplement are at highest risk for B12 deficiency. But when vegans do use supplements or fortified foods regularly, their B12 levels are just as good as people who eat animal products. So B12 doesn't have to be a problem. It's simply just something that needs to be planned for. Taking a B12 supplement is probably like the most effective and easiest and most straightforward way to protect your nerves and your health. In regards to B12, you can get them from fortified foods. I highly encourage you to do so. One of my favorite foods is nutritional yeast. I throw it on everything. But in reality, I'm not having enough every day. Like, I'm not having 3 servings every day, because that would be like, I don't know, 6 or 7 tablespoons, which is great some days, but I'm not having that every day. So B12 is definitely something that I would recommend supplementing if you are fully plant-based. And the general recommendation is to do 2,000 micrograms of cyanocobalamin. There's 2 types. There's cyanocobalamin or methylcobalamin, and the methylcobalamin is like all the rage right now. It's like in all the supplements, and it's honestly hard to find the cyanocobalamin in my experience, but there's just more research that shows that backs up cyanocobalamin, because the methylcobalamin is more newly investigated. So you can do the 2,000 micrograms of that once a week, or 50 micrograms every day. And it's best if you can get some sort of sublingual form, something that dissolves in your mouth or under your tongue. It will help increase absorption, and it's very highly effective. And then another thing to note is that our ability to absorb vitamin B12 does decline with age. And I believe the recommendation is for anyone over 65 to consider supplementing regardless of diet status. So something to consider. And then protein. It helps build and repair tissues, supports immune system, keeps our body functioning properly. Most adults need about 0.8 grams per kilogram each day, or per kilogram of your body weight each day. And it's truly rare to be deficient in protein unless you're under consuming calories. So amino acids are the building blocks of protein. You've probably heard of these because protein is very popular right now. There are 20 amino acids, and these are used to make proteins. There's 9 of them that our bodies can't make on our own, therefore they are essential. So there's the 9 essential amino acids that we have to obtain from foods. And there's been this argument around plant foods or plant protein that they're incomplete, or that they are inferior to animal-based or animal proteins. And the word incomplete is a little bit misleading because all plants contain all 9 essential amino acids. The challenge is that they don't contain them in the most optimal ratios or proportions. So there's typically one that's limiting, or like a limiting amino acid. So for example, grains are typically lower in lysine, while beans or legumes are typically lower in methionine. The good news is that as long as you eat a variety, you're covered. And it used to be thought that you had to pair your proteins together. You had to eat rice with beans in order to get the right amounts. But that's kind of been debunked recently in the research, because our body stores and recycles amino acids. We have a very small pool of amino acids, and during the day it can balance things out. So in between meals, if you're lacking one, like, it can rearrange and combine. So as long as you have a variety of sources throughout your day, you should be sufficient. And then the other argument against plant-based proteins is that they aren't digested as well as animal proteins. However, this is a little bit overstated because the idea comes from older studies done on animals, and it uses protein, plant protein that is not cooked, or it's completely unprocessed and raw, which again, we're not eating that way. Newer research shows plant proteins are quite digestible compared to animal proteins. A review found that plant protein digestibility ranges from 89 to 92%, which is similar. Eggs are 91%, and meat is anywhere from 90 to 94%. And then cooking consistently improves protein digestibility because heat is able to break down those cell walls and reduce the anti-nutrients we talked about earlier. So like those enzyme inhibitors. And if protein digestibility was a major issue, we would see widespread protein deficiency in vegetarian or vegan populations, but we're not seeing that. There's no clear biological markers of protein deficiency found in vegans or vegetarians who eat enough calories and have a variety of plant-based sources. The only concern could maybe be from someone eating like a monotonous diet, like only grains or only legumes, and also under eating. But more importantly, arguably, is that long-term studies show that when protein intake is adequate, muscle growth and strength are similar between plant-based and animal-based diets. Because that's what we see at the end of the day. We don't see what's going on in there, how many amino acids we have. We see how strong we are, and vegan and vegetarians are comparable to omnivores in terms of their muscle mass. And plant proteins have a health advantage. Higher plant protein is linked to lower risk of disease, heart disease, and overall mortality, while higher animal protein intake is linked to higher risk. And I do want to note that protein needs, regardless if you're plant-based or not, do increase with age. So instead of the 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight, it's closer to 1 or 1.2 grams, or grams per kilogram of body weight, just in order to prevent any muscle loss.
What about protein powders?
Protein powders. So that's kind of what I meant by this, like, optional. I think it's a matter of convenience for a lot of people. I think that they can be a tool, but it's up to preference. If you're definitely able to meet your protein needs through whole foods, then I would opt for that. But if that's limiting you and you can use a protein powder to help supplement, then by all means. But I think we're also in a day and age where protein is getting a lot of attention, and we don't necessarily need that much. We can't store it. Like, I know I said we have this little pool, but we can't really store excess protein, so we really just pee it out. So it's kind of an expensive product to invest in unless you really need it. So something to think about. And then omega-3s. Also a lot of attention around these days. These are essential fatty acids, meaning that we have to get them from food. They help support our heart health, brain and eye function, and inflammation regulation. There are 3 main types of omega-3s, ALA, EPA, and DHA. So ALA, or alpha-linolenic acid, is the only one that is essential, meaning our bodies can't make it, so we have to get it from foods. It's found in ground flax seeds, chia seeds, walnuts, hemp seeds, and soy foods. And then EPA and DHA are the longer chain forms of omega-3s that are often associated with fish or fish oil. Our bodies are able to convert ALA into DHA and EPA, so that's why those two are not necessarily essential, because we can convert them, but we do convert them in small amounts. And while this often worries some people, research shows that vegans and vegetarians may convert ALA more efficiently. And that having lower EPA and DHA levels in these groups haven't been linked to negative heart or cognitive outcomes. So what seems to matter actually is more of an overall fat balance. So a lot of you guys have probably heard about the ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 fatty acids. Omega-6s are very common in the Western American diet, largely from processed foods or fried foods. When omega-6 intake is super high, this can interfere with our body's ability to metabolize the omega-3s. So diets that are primarily plant-based or whole food-based tend to naturally support a more favorable ratio. And then you might also see plant-based EPA or DHA supplements. These are made from algae oil, so similar to fish oil, but they essentially cut out the middleman, since fish get their omega-3s from algae in the first place. They don't make it themselves. And then the research on this is pretty mixed still. Some studies show benefits, while others show no clear additional effect. So they're considered optional rather than a requirement. And then just regularly including ALA-rich foods, and keep ultra-processed foods low. And again, variety. So all of those things can help support omega-3s without needing fish or fish oil. This one's a fun one. So some vitamins are fat soluble. So vitamins A, D, E, and K, meaning that our body requires fat in order to absorb them. So if you eat a salad or a bowl of vegetables and you don't have any hummus or salad dressing or anything with a fat, you might not be absorbing those vitamins from those vegetables. Vitamin E, it's already found in fatty foods naturally, so like nuts, seeds, avocados, olive oils. So you don't really need to worry about pairing that one. But vitamin A, which is beta carotene, it gives vegetables that like deep colors, like bright oranges or even like the dark leafy greens. Kind of gives it that orange-red pigment. Those are like sweet potatoes, carrots, butternut squash, bell peppers. And then vitamin D, kind of talked about that before, mainly through our skin. But if you do a supplement or fortified milks or UV exposed mushrooms. And then vitamin K is going to be leafy greens. So kale, spinach, broccoli. Pairing those with a fat is extremely important, and that can help your body absorb those nutrients. So things like avocado, olive oil, dressing, nuts, seeds, or just avocado slice. Yeah.
Like how much? I've always wondered.
That's so funny. Marisa told me I was going to get that question. It seems like it's somewhere, well, it depends what you're having, but I would say like 1 to 2 tablespoons. So like if you're having a salad, like 1 to 2 tablespoons of dressing, it kind of just depends. But
you mean like 1 to 2 tablespoons of oil, like the equivalent of 1 to 2 tablespoons of oil per salad to maximize the absorption of those?
I guess it depends on what your salad is. I don't know the exact like amount per se, but it's definitely like you need to have enough. So I would say like no less than a teaspoon probably.
Okay.
Yeah, you need to have enough. Yeah, I would say it definitely depends like what you're eating. I would try to just look at serving sizes if that would help. Like if you're using a dressing, like try to hit the dressing, or if you're having like peanut butter, like the serving size for peanut butter, I believe, is like 2 tablespoons, and some people don't even have close to that. So just making sure to have enough. Some of my favorite combos are like fresh fruits and veggies or vegetables with like hummus, or like today, like having nuts and seeds on the salad in addition to the dressing, or roasting vegetables or potatoes and just using like an avocado oil. And then we kind of touched on this already, just to recap. Supplements and fortified foods are tools, and I am under the impression that they do not mean that your diet is not good enough or that you have failed. It means that you're well informed and you're taking action to support your health. So, like I said, vitamin B12 is essential if you're fully plant-based. D3 is often necessary, especially in these winter months or northern climates. And then omega-3s, again, are optional. Jury's still out on whether or not we need them. And fortified foods, so replacing regular salt with iodized salt, or looking for non-dairy milks and yogurts, or fortified foods that have calcium and vitamin D. Try to look for something that says like 20 or 25 or 30% of your daily value on that column. And then
So you're saying like salt with iodine can affect the thyroid?
Mm-hmm. So naturally, plant-based diets don't contain a lot of iodine. So the food themselves doesn't have a lot of iodine in them, versus like animal products has iodine in them. So the only way for us to really get it is to consume some sort of supplementation. You can do like nori seaweed every now and then. That also has iodine, but the problem with seaweed is that it's highly variable. So you can get way too much iodine or not enough at all. So it's hard to tell.
They tell my husband to reduce the salt intake,
Mm-hmm.
and then he has to take a thyroid supplement.
Oh, so is that your question? Like he has to reduce his salt?
Yeah, they said because of blood pressure,
Mm-hmm.
reduce the salt, but I don't know how close to having the thyroid issue was with lowering his salt intake.
So he was put on a iodine supplement?
No, he just has thyroid.
Oh, yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure. My only thing to say about like if you are reducing your salt intake is to definitely check with your doctor about whether or not an iodine supplement could be beneficial. But this is iodine's kind of the ones that's strictly for fully plant-based people. So if you do consume any dairy, eggs, or fish, you're probably getting enough iodine. So something to think about. I know I threw a lot of information at you, and a lot of us don't think of, when we eat, we don't really think about the individual nutrients. So this kind of helps make it simple. I think variety is key, just making sure that you're having a variety of different grains, plant proteins, fruits and vegetables, because they all contain various amounts of those different nutrients I mentioned. So having like half your plate fruits and veg, and then a quarter plant protein, and then a quarter starches and grains, and then using those oils to either dress or use as a sauce or cook with. So, and I think something to note about plant-based eating is that sometimes you can feel like you're eating a lot and then you're hungry a little bit later, and that's just purely because of the volume of food vegetables and fruit take up sometimes. So just remembering to eat enough. That might look like having 5 meals instead of 3 meals, and that's okay. Or having 3 meals and 2 snacks. So just something to think about, and making sure to kind of make it balanced. I think having the fat and the protein at every meal is going to help you feel more satiated. And then remembering to pair your foods. So the vitamin C with your iron-rich foods, and then your vitamins A, D, and K with fats. And in regards to coffee and tea, because those tannins I mentioned earlier, either separating them by an hour or 2, or having some milk or lemon in them. But yeah, that's basically all I have for you. Oh, and the food preparation. So making sure to cook your legumes fully if you're interested in soaking them beforehand. Opting for, today the salad had tempeh in it, which is, why am I blanking? Fermented, thank you. So opting for different things and trying new things. I think variety is probably the best strategy to avoiding micronutrient deficiencies. So, yep, that's all I have. So any other questions? Thank you. Thanks for listening.